Let's be honest, there is nothing worse than losing to a dude wearing a robe and a wizard hat. And in case you didn't know, ranged DPS are actually outperforming melee at every single rating benchmark. Someone has to fix this, which is why we made a list of the simplest and most effective counters to every ranged DPS in Season 2, which we promise will make those wizards pay for what they've done to your rating. And at Skillcapped, we don't take promises lightly. That's why for over a decade, we've been able to make the promise that you'll climb a minimum of 400 rating using our service. And if you don't, well, you get every penny back. No difficult refund process, no catches, no bullshit. We're simply just that confident in our service. Solo Shuffle is a whole different beast, and we get that. Playing the right way assumes you have two capable, like-minded teammates. But let's be real, that's just not happening. Which is why, instead of just teaching you the right thing to do, we focus on what actually helps you climb at your rating. From essential courses for every role designed to help you rank up fast, to simple-to-digest courses on positioning, game knowledge, strategies, and so much more. Skillcapped is the #1 service to rank up fast. Check out the exclusive discount link in the description below and start your climb today. The first range spec we need to put in the deep fryer is balanced druids, which honestly aren't really too meta right now. However, if you don't know how to play into them, they can easily dismantle your team. One of the biggest reasons for this is that their Cyclone can negate your team from dealing any pressure. It's also an excellent way for balanced druids to gain pressure, being able to Cyclone healers or even DPS low on health, which could win them the game. Because of this, it should be in your best interest to stop as many Cyclones as possible. That means tunneling them down is usually your best course of action. They are also great kill targets, being squishy themselves, forced to kite any heavy pressure if they don't have big defensive cooldowns. Just be sure to interrupt and CC them well in order to increase the likelihood of preventing clones throughout the game. Another big win condition Boomkins have is their ability to root beam a healer. This involves using a root effect and solar beam to lock them down for 8 seconds. It's a powerful crowd control that Boomkins will typically pair with big offensive cooldowns, creating a ton of pressure. The biggest counter to this is having root removal effects, such as Blessing of Freedom or Tiger's Lust, that can get your healer out of the root effect. Doing this will allow your healer to run out of the silence's radius with ease, being able to keep you alive. Healers themselves can also remove roots if they have access to certain abilities, like Spirit Walk, Escape Artist, and Steed of Liberty. Knowing what root removals your team has will be vital to play around root beam goes, so make sure your team utilizes them. Moving on, we have Evokers, starting off with Devastation being the more popular spec. Their constant damage with Disintegrate can sometimes be overwhelming if they're able to free cast it too much. So again, you want to look at interrupting these as much as possible, reducing their damage output during any game. You might be thinking to yourself, well, what about their Sleepwalk casts? Well, this might be situationally good, but most of the time, you want to hold kicks for Disintegrate so you can prevent their damage. If they land a Sleepwalk but don't have the damage to follow up, then the CC won't be too effective. A powerful cooldown Devastation Evokers have is Dragon Rage. It basically gives them a ton of damage, and they can prolong this buff if they free cast too much during this time. By kicking them or crowd controlling them during this cooldown, you can prevent a lot more of their pressure, increasing your chances of survival. Don't be afraid to trade big defensives here, or even peeling abilities in order to survive. Devastation Evokers may have a lot of kiting, but they are seriously prone to some melee with huge uptime, or casters in general due to their short range. As such, they typically make good kill targets for caster cleaves or the likes of demon hunters, being quite squishy against this pressure. So if your composition is great at killing dragons, make sure to abuse this whenever possible. As for Augmentation Evokers, you may not need to worry about them, but if you ever face one, all you need to watch out for is Breath of Eons. This 2-minute cooldown packs a serious punch, so you definitely want to trade big defensives here in order to survive it well. Outside of that, they shouldn't really be able to do much, so just interrupt their casts as much as possible, specifically upheaval casts. This can deal a lot of damage by itself, so delaying this cast and school in general will be great against Aug Evokers. With Evokers covered, we can now move on to 2 popular hunter specs, starting off with Beast Mastery. The main focus from BM Hunters is that their pets deal a lot of their damage through Bestial Wrath and Call of the Wild. These cooldowns need to be lived, and one great counter is having AoE CC for their pets. By using AoE roots, disorients, stuns, or fear effects, you can deny a ton of their pressure, making it much easier to live against. Just be wary with fear effects, as some BM hunters might play with the beast within, making pets themselves immune to fear effects during Bestial Wrath. If they pop Call of the Wild with Bestial Wrath, then this is where you probably will need to trade defensive cooldowns if you can't CC the pets well enough. You can also still line of sight the BM Hunter during Bestial Wrath to prevent a lot of damage. Even though their pressure is mostly from pets, they still need to be in your line of sight to use their main damaging spells. By line of sighting them, your HP shouldn't drop nearly as much, preventing a big chunk of their damage. Hunters themselves can be quite decent kill targets if you're able to keep up to them, being fairly squishy when you have uptime. Without Aspect of the Turtle, they will be extremely vulnerable to kill pressure, so make sure to abuse this if they're playing aggressively, positioning near your healer. If they kite around too much, then you could potentially be on a different kill target, making it harder for them to get CC on your healer. When facing hunters, their damage is completely the opposite, relying on casted damage that can deal absurdly powerful damage. This is mainly through the form of spamming aimed shots, and especially during their true shot cooldown, dealing incredible burst damage. You want to shut this offensive down as much as possible, using crowd control to prevent them casting too many aimed shots. The most efficient counter to true shot is using disarm effects. Without a weapon, hunters can't cast aimed shot or any of their impactful spells, preventing them from dealing any damage whatsoever, without putting them on stun DR. Since again, hunters are squishy, and hunters need to cast to deal great damage, they will become good kill targets for most compositions. If you target them, they will be forced to kite, which prevents a lot of their damage, since they can't cast aimed shots while running. So most of the time, they will be good kill targets if you can lock them down and keep up with them. Just be careful if they're trying to play too defensively, so you don't run out in a compromising position. One thing all hunter specs have in common is that they don't need to win on just damage, but they can easily win during their freezing trap windows on healers, creating huge problems for your team. However, any player can look to play around this. For DPS, you can firstly try to prevent the trap from landing entirely. You can do this by crowd controlling a hunter where you think he will land a trap, such as when they stun your healer. Some classes can even negate its effect, like Shamans using Grounding Totem to immune the trap completely. If you're unable to do this, then you can simply look to play defensive during this time, kiting the hunter, CCing them, or using defensives in order to survive during this time. Some healers can also play around traps, trying to preemptively break or immune it with their own spells. For example, a priest can use Shadow Word Death or Fade in order to immune the trap from landing. It might not be possible to break every trap in the game, but even breaking just one can help significantly when facing hunters. Now hunters have been sorted, we can talk all about the mage specs, which is probably the #1 class you want to counter. Mages pose a huge problem because when they play defensive, they are nearly immortal and as such, seem like they are impossible kill targets. And by the way, if you like what you've learned in this video so far, every tip is just a small snippet of what we offer in our game knowledge courses, where you can learn even more counters to every spec in WoW, including every melee and every healer too. The trick is to start off by not going on the mage, putting them into a false sense of security. This could make mages want to play aggressively, using their mobility to push in and try to CC your healer. This is where it's the time to strike. By having them waste mobility for offense, you can now swap to them and use mobility cooldowns to stick to them as much as possible, forcing big defensive cooldowns. A big tip to do this well is by saving your mobility cooldowns for this moment. If you know you want to swap on an aggressive mage, then you'll need mobility in order to punish them. If you do end up leaving a mage alone for too long, sometimes they may opt to use Ice Block offensively. This is something you could severely punish if you have the means of keeping up to them and maintaining pressure. One of the main reasons why mages are difficult kill targets is because of Alter Time. This cooldown is essential for a mage survival, using it on high HP and kiting so that they can live against any kind of pressure. A big weakness to it though is offensive dispels. If you can remove this with the dispel effect, then it will stop them from coming back to high HP. Doing this means you're much more likely to force other big defensive cooldowns or gain significant pressure against them as they rely on Alter Time to keep themselves alive throughout a game. All three specs of Mage have big offensive cooldowns that you will want to play around as well. Arcane Mages have access to Arcane Surge on a 1.5 minute cooldown that can deal a ton of damage. First of all, you can play around this by preventing its initial cast. By delaying them, it will be difficult for the mage to burst you down in the right moment. When they do get it off, you typically want to try and CC or interrupt the mage as much as possible, otherwise you may need to use defensive cooldowns to survive this pressure. Frost Mages have Icy Veins, and Fire Mages have Combustion, both being powerful offensive cooldowns which they will use to try and win the game. Again, during these cooldowns, you want to crowd control and peel the mage as much as possible, stopping them from overwhelming you with these offensive cooldowns. If unable to do so, you will need to use defensive cooldowns in order to survive. Just remember to try and always play around the mage's mobility and positioning. If they keep playing defensive, then be wary of chasing them to not get yourself kited too much. If they play offensive, then punish their aggression, looking to utilize your mobility when they don't have much to keep up to them and force big defensive cooldowns. Moving on, we have Shadow Priest, going from the most mobile class to the least. Shadow Priests don't have much mobility, so if you're snaring them, they won't have much breathing room to reposition without the help of their teammates. Even though they can feel tanky, it's still really important for some classes to abuse their mobility. Shadow Priests are basically target dummies that cast a lot. Not being able to kite too much means you can gain a lot more damage on them, making it easier to force big defensive cooldowns and have big pressure the entire game. It's important to interrupt any Shadow School spell to shut down their damage, making them lose out on some momentum. This is especially important during Dark Ascension, where Shadow Priests gain 20% extra damage on some of their spells. Minimizing their pressure during Dark Ascension will be in your best interest to stay alive, so kick or CC them well here to deny their damage. Aside from that, they also have access to Psyfiend. It's important to pay attention to this as it will reduce all healing on the target by 50%, making them extremely vulnerable. Due to its low health, you definitely want to kill this as soon as possible, negating its effect. If unable to, you could also line of sight the Psyfiend, which also stops it from working at all, swapping to any other player within line of sight. On top of that, Shadow Priests also play around CCing your healer heavily with cooldowns chained by themselves, which can be enough to take you down. This is the form of comboing Silence, Psychic Scream, and Psychic Horror, being all instant CC that can prevent your healer from healing for quite some time. As a healer, you could try to preemptively use defensive cooldowns before the CC chain begins, making their setup less effective. For DPS players, you can try to prevent the Shadow Priest from reaching your healer by heavily snaring or CCing them. Doing this could at least prevent them from landing a fear on your healer, making their CC chain less potent. One thing teams could look to stay on top of is their Vampiric Touch dots. This is their main way of applying pressure to multiple targets, and it can be dispelled by healers. You suffer a Horrify when dispelling it, but the Shadow Priest will have to get another cast off again to build up their pressure. If you have DPS players interrupting and stopping their casts, it will put the Shadow Priest significantly behind on damage, reducing their pressure in any game. All in all, Shadow Priests are quite vulnerable to damage, especially against physical heavy hitters that can constantly pressure them, making them easy kill targets. Going on them can stop their spam casts, making it easier to kill Psyfiends and prevent some of their crowd control on healers, so abuse this if you can. With Shadow Priests covered, we can now move on to Elemental Shamans, being quite strong in the current meta. A crucial part of Elemental Shaman's damage evolves around Flame Shock. It deals some damage, but more importantly, it gives the Shaman instant Lava Burst procs, and when used on targets with Flame Shock, it will always crit. Healers can look to spam dispel this debuff, basically removing damage from the Shaman and making it more difficult for them to keep up pressure. This is especially important to do so before Primordial Wave, where they will send out Lava Bursts on all Flame Shock targets, so you can reduce their burst pressure by quite a big margin. Shamans vary as a good target depending on if you're a caster or melee. Most melee are good at tunneling them, pressuring them heavily, whereas casters will struggle to kill them early on. Even though they have quite a few defensive cooldowns and are tanky to casters, they can be good kill targets, especially in dampening as they can't always avoid damage without kiting too much. If they spend a lot of time kiting to avoid pressure, then naturally their damage will suffer as they need to cast a bit in order to maximize their damage output. Shamans also have access to Tremor Totem, which can be a nuisance to most teams with fear cooldowns, such as warriors or priests. If you land your AoE fears on Shamans or CC them at the same time you fear their healer, it could be an easy way to force their trinket to use Tremor Totem. Doing this will make it easier to control a Shaman while they have no trinket, or even be prone to dying having no trinket for devastating setups. Last up, we have some counters to every Warlock spec you need to know about. One thing all Warlocks have in common is that they have Demonic Teleport. This spell is vital for any Warlock to kite, and will be something you have to play around if you're trying to kill them. Usually, saving mobility cooldowns for this will be necessary, so you can keep up to them and continue pressuring them. Most of the time, Warlocks will be your favored kill target, as they are quite squishy and will need interrupting on their casts to stop their pressure. Our Affliction Warlocks are the most popular spec right now, being one of the highest damaging specs in the game. This is due to their multi-dotting capacities with Unstable Affliction and their burst with Haunt. That means you should try your best as a team to interrupt these casts or line of sight them, denying the Warlock too much pressure. Without Unstable Affliction up, healers can also dispel all other dots, denying them from extra pressure while not suffering any backlash. The current 4 set for Affliction Warlocks has a chance to spread any UAs on nearby targets, so denying them is even more important now to reduce their pressure. Whenever you face Destruction Warlocks, you will treat them the same, but it's important to know they have 2 different schools on their important casts, being Fear or Chaos Bolt. Fear is on its own Shadow School, so interrupting this will allow the Destro to cast out Chaos Bolts, which could be tough for your team to deal with if you don't have any disruption tools. As such, you only want to interrupt Fear if it's absolutely necessary, typically on your healer when your team is low on health. Most of the time, you want to be interrupting Chaos Bolts, as it's in the Chaos School, which will prevent the Warlock from casting most other abilities, including Fear. By denying these casts, you'll also stop the Destro from having too much pressure. The only way a Destruction Warlock can win is by getting too many big Chaos Bolt spells casted on a target. So targeting the Warlock, stopping these casts, and pressuring them heavily is usually your best course of action against this spec. Another Destro-only spell that they have is Havoc, which they typically use in conjunction with Mortal Coil to CC multiple DPS, allowing them to get important casts off. Havoc can be decursed, so if you have access to this and you track it, you should be able to quickly dispel it, denying the coil from landing on one target. You can also look to try to outplay this with a quick dispel as a healer when the coil lands, or things like Reflect, Grounding, or Blade Storm can immune the coil's effect, making it more difficult for the Warlock to create pressure. That leaves us to the last spec, which is Demonology Warlocks, being the least scary spec in terms of needing to shut down their cast. Although they are still good kill targets, and interrupting spells like Hand of Gul'dan will be in your best interest to reduce their pressure. The main thing to watch out for Demo Warlocks is their Summon Demonic Tyrant casts. This cooldown does a bit of damage, but more importantly, it empowers all current pets the Warlock has out, allowing them to deal unbelievable pressure. Luckily for you, there are many ways to play around this spell, as it's effectively a casting NPC. You can start off by interrupting its casts, or even CCing it, denying a lot of its pressure. You could also line of sight the Warlock during Tyrant to avoid pressure from it and their pets. This could be warranted if you have no defensive cooldowns and need to avoid damage if it will take you down. And if you're sick of feeling hard stuck this season, our updated class courses are like a cheat code for Season 2. We are the #1 service for mastering any spec in PvP, allowing you to skip the annoying process of trial and error. Pair that with our courses on positioning, game knowledge, and more, and you will save time while actually gaining rating. Our subscription also includes the #1 fully configured UI for both PvP and PvE, which now even has BIS lists displayed directly in-game to help you gear, and talent builds that you can instantly import to make sure you are ahead of the competition. You will also get one free VOD review every month, on top of instant access to support from Rank 1 players thanks to our Ask a Pro forum, where you can get answers to any PvP question. This is why we continue to offer a rank up guarantee that promises you will gain rating while using skill caps, and if you don't, then you will get your money back. To get started, be sure to click the links below this video for a special discount. For now, we want to thank y'all for watching. See you soon.